And last but not least, as they say, and today's final presentation, we're going to go back to some practical problems. And those practical problems are something that we're all very familiar with here at Loyola Marymount and all across the university spectrum. I've experienced it myself, I've seen it myself. There is a kind of mental health crisis among young people in today's America. And it's evident when you, especially from the university perspective, when you see students writing about it. And well, what can help them? Well, Lauren Starr Caplan, who is an experienced yoga teacher, has come up with a kind of a solution to this problem. How to bring yoga as a mental health tool into the university classroom. Now, this is not as easy as it might sound. Organizing a class in yoga is not as simple. It has a lot of different elements that need to be thought about. And you know, at Loyola Marymount, we have that, but other universities don't. And it's still a very, very minor field. So Lauren actually investigates a number of different possibilities, different ways in which yoga can become a living tradition that helps students adapt to situations, mental health problems that perhaps they have previously not had experience with. It gives them a chance to actually learn techniques to prevent these situations happening in the first place. So we have a lot to learn here, and I want to give this over to Lauren and to let her illuminate with her experience and her you know, vast teaching knowledge, how we can actually go about introducing yoga in that kind of way. So thank you very much for Nico, and Lauren, if you want to take over and bring the presentations to an end for today. Do we have Lauren? There she is.
Can you see me?
We can see you, yes.
Okay. I just need to share my screen here.
Absolutely.
So Nico, you will need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, as soon as Nico stops, I can start.
All right.
But
I think there's a little red button at the top that should say stop screen share.
There we go. There we are. All right, Lauren, take it away.
okay, can you see my screen? And you can hear me.
We
Okay.
can see and hear it. We're ready.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Lauren Starr Caplan, and I'm presenting my thesis work on optimizing college yoga for mental health benefits. Last semester, if you'll all remember what it was like to be on a college campus meeting in person, last semester I had the opportunity to teach a module of an Introduction to Yoga course on the Loyola Marymount University campus. I was technically a teaching assistant, but I did have my own section that I taught. One of the things that stood out to me about that experience was A, the comprehensive model that Loyola Marymount puts forth in its Introduction to Yoga course, and B, one of the weekly assignments that the undergrads had to do was to write a 2-page reflection journal every week on a certain yoga philosophy topic. I was alarmed, I was saddened by the consistency with which students shared with me difficulties that they had in the realms of mental health. And when I use the term mental health, I mean anywhere from very light symptoms to heavier symptoms, things like stress management, anxiety, depression, and low self-image, just to name a few. For my presentation, I'll go over my research questions. I'll give you a context of yoga and the mental health context that led me to do this work. I'll go over my methodology briefly and then move into findings and recommendations. So the two questions that I sought the answer to in my research were, first, given that it's an emerging field, teaching yoga in university is a new phenomenon, so how is it being taught? My second question is, given the mental health crisis that Dr. Walsh just referenced, the mental health crisis on college campuses, what would be the best way to structure and deliver a yoga course to ensure optimal health benefits to students? Now, why are these questions important? Well, I'll start with the American College Health Association, which puts out an American College Health Assessment every year. And my studies showed quite a few issues on college campuses that students deal with in regards to student health, mental health, and, as you all know, the combination of mental health issues, stress, and the easy access to alcohol and drugs and other ways that people self-medicate. These numbers you'll see on your screen were put out. And I just want to point out that this was a study that included 31,000 US college students from all over the country. So they were taken from all types of colleges and universities, from residential to commuter, 2-year to 4-year. They really had a vast spectrum of people who participated in the study. And I also noticed, and can't help thinking when I look at these numbers, that these are just the numbers of people who responded in the positive. And it makes me think about the people who don't report. The third number is of specific interest to me because it says there that 30.4% of college students were treated or diagnosed by a mental health professional in the year preceding when they answered these questions. And it just makes me wonder what percentage of people do share or do experience some types of mental health symptoms rather, without coming forward and seeking treatment. One of my colleagues, Stephanie Serrano, she was in the cohort last year, 2019. She did a very interesting study on college yoga and how it can help college mental health. One of the lines of research that I learned through reading her thesis was that colleges have a limited resources for dealing with mental health. So we have the problem that I referenced in my earlier slide. A, not everybody comes forward, even if they're dealing with symptoms of mental health. But B, colleges have at their disposal, and this is in the best of situations, colleges have at their disposal the ability to do one-on-one counseling, which can be very helpful. However, it's usually short-term one-on-one counseling, and medication, which does work for some people. But more and more as I looked at this issue, I just was thinking, and also with the help of Stephanie Serrano's work, that a college yoga course that targets mental health is a cost-effective way to address this issue. And it also addresses people who might not come forward and acknowledge their symptoms. So knowing from personal experience and from the studies how effective yoga can be for mental health, I kept these things in mind as I researched my project. As you know, this opportunity to give a presentation just allows me to share a fraction of the research that I did. So I can't share all the studies that show the benefits to mental health of yoga practices, but I would like to highlight this study. This is a study put out or published by the National Institute for Health. And essentially it looks at the physical or physiological, neurobiological suppositions as to why yoga practices positively affect mental health. I'd like to make a point here that when it says yoga practices, comprehensive yoga practices, as I have at the top of the screen, this study was specifically looking at subjects who practiced postures and breathing techniques and meditation techniques and yoga philosophy. So it was a real comprehensive panel that they were looking at. There are an abundance of ways that yoga can help mental health, but this study highlighted two. As the study itself uses the language, it helps from the top down, because practicing these practices helps increase the body's production of GABA, which is one of the brain chemicals that has antidepressant effects. And yoga also helps from the bottom up, because practice of yoga, of these comprehensive practices, helps to decrease inflammation in the body by increasing vagal nerve tone. Okay, so going back to what I did to get the information for this study, I had 15 interviews with instructors from college yoga programs across the country. It was a random sampling of colleges, and I would like to just put a note in here that there's a lot more work to be done. But I spoke to 15 instructors. I spoke to 3 graduates from yoga teacher training programs that were housed at colleges. I also looked at studies on how yoga affects mental health. And my research led me into some really interesting territory with somatics and yoga pedagogy. I'll try to sum that up here just by saying that somatics is essentially prioritizing the subjective experience of our human bodies. So those of you who are listening who have practiced yoga, and there are many other complementary therapies and practices that do the same thing. It's not just yoga. There's an emphasis put on the ability to sense ourselves from the inside. For me to be able to sense, for instance, something simple like when I need to eat or when I need to use the bathroom. Those are small examples. A higher level example is to be in a yoga pose and sense if you're in line or not quite in line without the use of a mirror. I could go on, but that was an interesting track that my research brought me to as an important element in ensuring mental health benefits to yoga practitioners. And while I'm on this slide, I'd just like to point out also a distinction here is that if you look at yoga campuses around the country, as my research showed, you can find many colleges that do offer yoga in a variety of ways. However, what I'm looking at here is just for credit yoga. So in other words, I didn't look at programs that offer, say, a yoga club or yoga classes at the recreation center. I was taking into account just those colleges that have 4 credit yoga courses. Okay, now I've put this slide in here just to make sure you really pay attention, because the next slide is going to show a pivotal finding of this study. The pivotal finding of this study is that in order to maximize the mental health benefits of college yoga, yoga needs to be taught as a system. Specifically, as you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, the system that I'm talking about are these comprehensive yoga practices that are listed there. Now, I only listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comprehensive yoga practices because those are the most important as far as what the studies show. I would like to say there are countless other yoga practices that I haven't listed here because I didn't find studies about them. And I'll just do a shout out to those right now. Some of those practices are community service practices, seva practices, mantra, japa, yoga nidra, and so on. Okay, let's take a closer look at those comprehensive yoga practices. So many of you will be familiar with these terms. The top term, asana, that's yoga postures. The second term is pranayama, that's yogic breathing practices. Yogic philosophy, very important as a part of this comprehensive panel of practices. Svadhyaya is related to philosophy. And essentially what I mean using the term in this context is looking at aspects of yoga philosophy and how I myself am applying them. So let's just take something simple like satya, like truth, telling the truth. Svadhyaya or the philosophy would be to study what this concept means, and then svadhyaya is to study, really take a hard look at myself and how am I employing this yogic philosophical concept. Relaxation, and then meditation and mindfulness. So I'm sure many of you watching this right now who are familiar with yoga, you're seeing these practices and you're saying, yeah, of course, those are all part of my yoga practice. But the reason that I'm emphasizing them here is because although in my studies, I did my interviews with yoga instructors, most, not all, of the instructors that I spoke to did acknowledge the importance of these practices in teaching their students. However, when I looked at the curriculum, the actual time given to many of these practices was very, very little or non-existent in some cases. It won't surprise many of you in my cohort to learn that the prominent practice that was taught was asana, which makes sense, especially because many of these yoga programs are held in physical education departments, and asana has very many benefits. It's just that even when some instructors gave lip service to the importance of these other practices, when I would look at the curriculum, they weren't really being given many hours or much depth. Now, as I was writing this, I was imagining, one of my audiences to be colleges who would like to implement yoga courses, or colleges who have yoga courses, but they'd like to tweak them to make them more effective for mental health. So as you can imagine, many of those colleges don't have an idea of this variety of the practices that we're recommending here. Yes, and so one of the things that I asked in my interviews to the instructors was, what oversight did the administration have in helping to create the curriculum? And I'm just going to read you 3 of the answers. These were very representative of the answers I received. So in terms of administrative oversight, one instructor said, no input whatsoever. Another said, no one has ever looked at my syllabus. Another said, the administration believes me to be the expert, so I was given full rein to write the curriculum and teach as I thought best. So now I've already gone into talking about some of the findings that I found from the interviews that I did. One of the findings that really stood out to me was the difference in facilities. So there are there's just such a broad range of how yoga is being taught according to my case studies. So there certainly are some places that have a lot of elements in place. Loyola Marymount is one of definitely the prime example in terms of having good facilities and also having a comprehensive curriculum. Other places, yoga was taught in gyms, yoga was taught in fitness studios. There's one case where yoga was taught in the theater green room. A couple of places had specialized yoga rooms just built for the yoga program. In other cases, there were standard classrooms with the desks pushed to the side, et cetera, et cetera. One of the complaints that many teachers spoke about with facilities was just a lot of noise, excess noise. I'll give you one example. There's a woman who teaches yoga, and she has to teach in a big gym with a huge ceiling and with a partition down the middle. The other side of the partition is a dance class, a modern dance class with really loud music. So she's teaching yoga, but she finds it really hard to teach some of the more somatic aspects, the more internally focused aspects, because of the facilities that she works with. Some of the other findings, I wasn't expecting this, but there are some colleges, this is especially popular in community colleges, who offer yoga teacher training certification programs where students can get certified to teach yoga. And then everyone I spoke with said that the students that they were working with were just really stressed. I want to give one more example of an instructor who I spoke with, who was, just to show a number of the issues that some instructors deal with. She was teaching an introduction to yoga class, and she was also teaching a higher level yoga class in the fitness department. And students would sign up for the class, but there were no prerequisites. So she would get beginners in the more higher level class. And because it was a higher level class in a fitness department, students would be disappointed because her higher level yoga didn't necessarily mean higher level fitness. She meant some of the more esoteric practices of yoga. So in terms of considering where colleges house and administer their programs, it's really important to think about the facilities, and also that the department that administers yoga gives much consideration to the ability of the students to be able to explore somatically, to be able to explore some of the practices of Samkhya, where we connect with our own senses. That's a really important part of the mental health benefits that we find in yoga. So those are really important for colleges looking to upgrade their mental health benefits or to start yoga programs. I'm just going to show here, I think it's really interesting, all these different names of departments, kinesiology, dance, phys ed, health. You can see them on your screen there. Those are different departments at some of these random colleges that offer yoga. And then this is just, found this interesting. These are colleges that do offer courses, but they're outsourced. So in other words, if you become a student at one of these colleges, you'll get access to, say, Yoga Glow or yogathome.com. So you can take courses, but they're not for credit and they're not offered on the campus. So all things put together, I have recommendations here. I've been over most of them, but just to put them in concrete terms, it's really important that curriculum that addresses mental health for students includes comprehensive yoga practices. All those practices need to be taught. It's also important that the curriculum includes elements of Samkhya, getting in touch with the senses and the elements. And the more Western way to talk about that is somatics, the subjective experience of feeling my body, feeling my blood pressure, feeling my anxiety. Those are really important in offering health benefits to students. Finally, as I mentioned, it's important that departments and facilities consider their particular situation and choose departments and facilities to house yoga that best support the recommended curricular elements above. That is my report. I thank you all for your help, my professors and cohort colleagues. Any questions?
Well, first of all, it couldn't be any better in terms of the final slide. I think it sums it up a little bit. You know, that view looking over into the luminous nothingness, I suppose, or something, whatever is there. But actually, outstanding work. I mean, it's very, very important that we take, you know, I feel sometimes that young people's problems are not taken seriously. I see that politically, I see that economically, and I also see it sometimes in terms of mental health. And we cannot assume that young people are going to grow out of these issues. These are really serious issues that young people are dealing with, and we need new tools to help us provide answers, tools that go beyond medications, tools that actually give the students an opportunity to understand themselves. And what you have done, I think, is present how universities can help with that particular issue. If there are any questions or comments, this would be the perfect time. The chat is, again, going great. Everybody is obviously impressed. If anyone wants to jump in, please do. There's a question from Laurie. Dr. Fazio, was there anything you experienced in teaching intro to yoga that surprised you besides their level of mental health issues?
Yes, I was surprised at how attentive they were to the tools. I had not taught college students before, although I've taught yoga for a long time. And it was an interesting interplay to see what I would teach and then what they would write about in their journals. And referring also back to Stephanie Serrano's work last year, she, how do I say this quickly? She essentially showed that specifically in the LMU Intro to Yoga class, the students benefited most from pranayama pranayama practices. Secondly, from philosophical concepts, and then postures and meditation. So she did a comprehensive clinical study on that. And that was really interesting to see that those were the things that the students came out of it learning, although most of them went in there thinking that they would be learning just postures.
I think this question's actually in the chat also, but I'm wondering, as you researched the qualifications for the yoga teachers at the different colleges and universities, was there a standard?
That's a really good question. Because some of the college instructors that I had access to were through this program, I did speak to some who had their master's degree. But most, I would assume, do not have their master's degree in yoga because this is such a new program. And I certainly spoke to a couple who were very poorly trained. There was one woman who'd never taught yoga before in her life. She was a personal trainer, and she took an online yoga course to get a yoga teaching certificate. And then she went right into her job teaching college level yoga. So that's an example of what some of the standards are. There were also some, some really excellent instructors. One has been teaching yoga for over 30 years. So there was a huge variance in who was teaching college yoga.
Okay.
Can't hear you, Dr. Walsh, you're on mute.
Go. There's another question online, Lauren, about how would you recommend approaching some of these more non-asana practices in an online environment?
Oh, good question. Well, we're doing it right now. Definitely that was part of my interview because, of course, I was doing my work this COVID semester. So all of the instructors who I spoke to were transitioning or had transitioned their classes online. It's a really difficult question because I think a lot of what beginners struggle with, and I'm a beginner too in terms of meditation and concentration, is not having distractions around, and oftentimes just being human beings, when we're left to our own devices, we get distracted. So what the in-person experience definitely offers is a teacher there watching you not pick up your phone and really making sure that the environment is such that people can focus. I don't think I'm really answering the question in a positive way, just to say I think it's difficult to teach this stuff online. If you have a student who's really a self-starter, who's really interested and makes himself or herself focus, great. But other than that, it's really easy to get distracted. I don't have any hints for that.
Okay, we have a couple of other questions. What were these schools looking for in terms of qualifications in their job advertisements? And the other question is from Dr. Fazal. Were they looking for yoga for mental health, or were they looking for yoga for something else?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to what the job advertisements were looking for. I didn't ask that, and I'm not sure the answer to that.
Okay.
I do know that some colleges, it just depends on the level of college, but some colleges look to hire instructors who have a master's degree in something. There hasn't been a master's degree in yoga studies for longer than 6 years in this country, as far as I know. So it would be hard to find people who had that particular degree, but I don't know, perhaps they look for people who had, comparable master's degree and maybe some experience teaching yoga. And in terms of Dr. Fazio's question, who was looking for the mental health? I don't know if she's referring to the student.
Yeah, not looking for, but were the schools explicitly recognizing that yoga is supportive for, well, both mental health and also the individuation process of somebody shifting from childhood under their family umbrella, in many cases, not all cases, obviously, going into university, finding the path for their life purpose, and kind of looking at that question of who am I, which in these yoga classes, we can have them explore beyond who am I and what do I do, right? Who am I in that superficial sense? But actually at this very critical phase of their life, helping them look at the deeper who am I? And I'm curious if any of the teachers indicated that either there was that type of contemplation that the schools were explicitly acknowledging, or if they were explicitly acknowledging this is supportive for mental health, or was it more, here's a fitness class?
From what I understood, it was, here's a fitness class. Now, there are some notable exceptions. LMU, Naropa University also had a different approach to it. Scottsdale Community College had a different approach to it. But for the most part, the administration wasn't looking for yoga for mental health, wasn't looking for yoga for individuation, wasn't looking for yoga to train young people to properly develop their prefrontal cortex. Those things were not a part of the discussions that the instructors had when they were hired with the administration. So it seems on the administration side, it's just not on their radar, some of the benefits that yoga can bring.
So until that is on radar, then it's really, is it a teacher who comes in who says, oh, here's what I want to do, their own mission, if they, as you said, some schools gave them free rein? Or is it more about educating at the university level to, which is what we're hoping to do, was to demonstrate, here's the value of this type of approach, and then disseminate it outwards?
Yeah, really, really great question. Great question. I think ideally it would be at the university level. One of my findings, which I didn't mention in this presentation, was about standardization. So in the case, if you were to standardize a curriculum, let's say across a state university system or something like that, even if you couldn't get a very well-trained teacher, you would at least have the curriculum there. But in the meantime, before and unless administrations and universities see the benefits that a class like this could offer, I think, as you suggested, Dr. Fazio, it would be up to individual yoga instructors. And that really accounts for a lot of the variation that I saw in the quality of the curriculum that was offered through the different people I interviewed. It's sort of the Wild West in terms of who shows up as a teacher is going to determine the level of curriculum that's delivered.
There may be an opportune time right now as universities are looking at potential shifts in how we're delivering education based upon this COVID experience, that that could perhaps restructure such that the high levels of stress that are underlying, which are not just from school, they're from life, as we all saw, there's life experiences that they're having, and they're just not equipped with tools to be able to manage, you know, the everyday things like, you know, somebody's, they know somebody who dies and they just completely stop going to class. And these are life things that are just daily life. It's not systemic issues, while those still exist. It's also daily life things that they just don't have the tools, which is fascinating to reflect upon, is how many students don't have those tools. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fazio, for that insight. That's really interesting and important for us, I think, for all educators. I've had that experience myself, you know, with students, somebody dies and they can't cope with it, or something else happens because no one's taught them those skills. So Lauren, I think Lauren's presentation brings us to a close for the presentations today. Really wonderful. All the presentations, I have to say, congratulations to all the students. You guys really deserve all the credit.
As I have this honor of bestowing the superlative of Ananda. In Sanskrit, Ananda means bliss, happiness, delight. And Lauren, it's the qualities that you emanate and bring wherever you go. Lauren walks into the room and it lights up. There's this orb of radiance that follows wherever you go. And as you know, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, we recognize in the Panchamaya the 5 layers of our being that are inseparable, they're interwoven. And the most subtle layer of our being and the closest to our divine nature or Brahman is Anandamaya. And when I think of Lauren, a smile immediately permeates throughout my entire body as she emanates this bliss or Ananda wherever she goes. And I really learn from each and every student every year. It's one of the joys of being a professor. And one of the things that I've learned from Lauren is that no matter what is happening in life, we have the choice. Oh, Lauren, you disappeared. There she is. Sorry, you disappeared there.
I'm still here.
Okay. I want to see your face while I talk to you. This is the online. We have the choice to connect with this aspect of our being, and you do just that. It reminds me, there's also, if anybody knows Buddha's buddies or Buddha's cousin and most beloved disciple, Ananda. And Ananda was known for his memory and his devotion and his compassion. And last semester, working with Lauren on the Intro to Yoga course that you were just so beautifully discussing, I got to witness you embody these qualities as you worked with the undergraduates in that course. The compassion, the devotion, the commitment to both their education, their well-being, and that motherly love that you bring to each and every one of them is those innate qualities that you have. We can learn education, and we also have innate qualities. And you bring that heart and joy to all that you do. And so it's truly such a well-deserved and honor to give the award of Ananda to Lauren Starr Caplan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. That's very touching. You all have really given my colleagues great, perfect names, superlatives. So I guess I'll have to believe that this one is appropriate to me too. I've just learned so much from all of you, and Dr. Laurie, the ways in which I've learned from you have been intellectual, academic, but also by watching ways of being, bhava, disposition. Just had a really very generous faculty. Thank you all for what you've given in terms of your knowledge and your ways of being. I was watching, I learned so much. Thank you very much. What an opportunity.